Long before Israel had a king, the social order had shattered. The Book of Judges describes an era defined by a terrifying premise. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Subjective morality was the law of the land. To understand the consequences of that vacuum, we are analyzing the tragic breakdown of a nation recorded in Judges chapters 19 through 21. The crisis begins with an act of extreme violence. In the town of Gibeah, a mob brutally attacks and kills a Levite's concubine in the middle of the night. Following the murder, the Levite took her body, divided it into 12 pieces, and sent a piece along each of these paths, out into the territories of the 12 tribes of Israel. This was a calculated shock tactic. By sending these grisly reminders to every corner of the land, the Levite created a nationwide provocation designed to bypass reason and trigger a collective, visceral outrage. When the Levite eventually testified before the National Assembly, he omitted his own cowardice. He hid the fact that he personally handed his concubine over to the mob to save himself, framing the event to center his own victimhood. Hearing this one-sided account, the other 11 tribes instantly united in a roaring fury. They didn't ask a single follow-up question or attempt to cross-examine his narrative. This imbalance illustrates the primary risk in conflict resolution. Avoiding bias requires cross-examining facts, not accepting a single narrative. Maintaining objectivity means withholding a verdict until every perspective is weighed. Finally, compassion serves as a safeguard, prioritizing restoration over a reflex to punish. Because the Israelites lacked these safeguards, they acted on incomplete information. Their response rapidly shifted from a pursuit of justice into an indiscriminate crusade. The opposing side was equally entrenched. The tribe of Benjamin chose tribal pride over the law, using their formidable military strength to shield the men of Gibeah from facing the consequences of their crime. On the other side of the battlefield, the 11 tribes assumed that because they were fighting against a horrific act, their own conduct was beyond reproach. They saw themselves as the sole arbiters of justice. This reveals how self-righteousness functions. When a group is fueled by raw emotion and fleshly anger, they risk committing acts that mirror the very evil they set out to punish. While the Israelites moved as one, this militaristic alliance was not biblical unity. True unity is designed to build the gospel and restore brethren, not to facilitate the destruction of an entire tribe. When a group finds its common ground in shared hatred rather than shared love, they create a false unity, one that does not carry the blessing of God. They eventually sought divine guidance, but only to confirm the decisions they had already made. They didn't ask if they should go to war, but only who should lead the first wave. This is a prayer of presumption. It treats God as a rubber stamp for human plans, rather than a sovereign authority to be consulted. The consequences were catastrophic. Despite their massive numerical advantage, the 11 tribes suffered 2 humiliating defeats, losing 40,000 men in the process. This scale of loss forces a critical pause for self-reflection. It suggests that before confronting the sins of others, one must first identify the hidden anger or pride within their own ranks. Without that introspection, it is impossible to know if an action is a genuine desire for restoration or simply a crusade fueled by one's own sin. Broken by their losses, the Israelites finally changed their approach. On their third attempt to seek God, they came with weeping and fasting. Fasting and weeping serve a specific purpose here. These acts strip away human pride and military confidence, signaling a total reliance on God's sovereignty. They followed this with burnt and fellowship sacrifices. This was a public confession of their own spiritual failures, acknowledging their own need for atonement before addressing the faults of Benjamin. Finally, they posed an open-ended question: should we go up? This time, they were prepared to accept no as an answer. Victory was only promised once the people shifted from demanding validation to submitting in total humility. The 11 tribes eventually achieved a victory, but it was a grim one. By the end of the conflict, the tribe of Benjamin had been nearly annihilated. In the aftermath, the survivors realized their self-righteous anger had permanently scarred the nation. They had won, but they stood in a landscape of ashes. Avoiding such devastation requires a departure from tribal rage. shifting instead toward the structured, restorative principles Jesus later outlined in Matthew 18. These two paths lead to entirely different ends. Love and humble prayer are designed to restore a community, while human rage and self-righteousness are designed only to destroy it. The next time you face a conflict, put down the sword of self-righteousness. Seek the whole truth. Before taking a single step forward,